5. This is One for the Record. I'm Diana, and today is December 27th, 2014. Here are your news updates for today. I'm going to put on the Dr. Deagle, Bill Deagle NUTRIMEDICAL report with Ann Morrison and J.R. Moore, John Moore, the Liberty Man. Now this is from December 19th, but it's very pertinent, even though it was a few days ago. I wanted to wait till after Christmas to let you guys hear this. So enjoy the show. Also, here's a Diana theory. Now, most of you have heard that we're trying to stop the embargo with Cuba. And Russia paid, what, Russia wrote off the debt of Cuba, like billions of dollars. Now, why would they do that? I was listening to a Common Sense guy, and he was talking about, we don't need their sugar, we don't need their tobacco. Now, wait a minute. Then something sparked. Here's a Diana theory. Tell me if this makes sense. Cuba has, what, sugar cane over there? Big supplier of that, and I guess their cigars. Now, they're on the Atlantic side of the ocean. And let's say everything's being contaminated from Fukushima. So Hawaii's sugarcane crop is either not growing, mutated, or it's too radioactive that it's going to shut down. And that's a big supplier of that's a big supplier of our sugar. So they're going to have to get stuff from the Atlantic side just for a short run, as long as that's still good. Alrighty then, so heads up. I believe that they're being friendly with Cuba is because our crops in Hawaii are not going to be any good. Also, when I went out for Christmas, person's house I went over to, oh, there weren't any canned pineapple. I could only get fresh. Why is that? Because Dole is in Hawaii, right? Alrighty then, heads up. So I don't know what's going on, but it's probably affecting all the crops in Hawaii, the sugar cane. So heads up, we're probably gonna have to start getting it from Cuba. That's what's going on. That's why they're lifting the embargoes, is because our crops are gonna fail or be too contaminated or mutated in some way, and it's gonna be detectable. Alrighty then, so that's my theory. Prove me wrong. Also, another thing I thought about, because they say it's in the Bible that Jesus' birthday is in September. I've heard that since I was a kid, and from various people, and I guess it might be in Jeremiah. I don't know where it is, but I guess he was born in the fall, not the winter. So if his birthday was, I've seen things where they say his birthday was on 9/11. So in an emergency, what do you dial? 911, right? 9/11. Think about it. Makes sense, huh? Even that terrible thing that happened in New York, that was on 9/11. So just think about it. I know other countries probably have different numbers, but we're the Christian country originally. So 9/11. You call 9/11 when there's an emergency, right? Makes sense. Take care. Be prepared for anything. Doesn't matter when you celebrate. You should be celebrating his birthday every day. So it doesn't, you know. So it's not bad that we do it on the 25th. We should add the 9th. 11 on there. We should September 11th. We should be celebrating it again. There you go. Make another Make the true holiday. Alrighty then, take care. See you tomorrow on the flip side. Enjoy this upload.
Well, we're joined by Ann Morrison. Ann is a scientist, Ann is an engineer, and she pays very careful attention to the things that concern us, and we are sitting in for Dr. Bill Deagle here on Friday the 19th day of December. Anyway, Ann, we were talking earlier this morning about the events that are going on around the world, Ebola and Fukushima and so forth. I'm getting more and more reports about increased radiation levels as a consequence of Fukushima. How about you?
Yes, apparently what's happening is that they're finding out that the Sea of Akash, and that's between Russia and Japan. So it's north of Japan and east of Russia. And the surface water there becomes very dense and then spreads east. Well, it comes up the Aleutian Trench. And so the heavier radiation particles are falling into that trench, and then the current is carrying them into the, well, they call it a subtropical gyre, and then above Japan it's called a subpolar gyre. And
right.
So what's happening is it's being carried across the ocean, and then back into the Gulf of Alaska, and then back towards Japan. Well, it's settling all the time, and what's happened is it's settled in the Gulf of Alaska. So they are now finding that there is radiation at about 300 feet down that they never saw before. And they think that this is only going to increase. We know that there is a warming in the Gulf of Alaska, and it could be due to the radiation that's being deposited there. They have measured cesium-134, but they use cesium-134 as an indicator for cesium-137 and also for strontium-90.
Before you go any farther, there's sufficient radioactive particles to actually physically warm the water?
Well, they don't know. They said they've never, in all the history that they can go back through, and that's including ice sample cores and things like that, they have never seen such a warming in the Gulf of Alaska. Never in their, and so it's so far out of spec. In other words, it's nowhere close to being near anything that they've ever seen before. So they think they have measured an increase in the cesium-134, and like I said, that's an indicator for the cesium-137 and the strontium-90, which are of interest to humans because they have a 30-year half-life, which means that they stay in a human once they get into a human. The body treats cesium-137 like it does potassium, and potassium is used. It's used to balance our systems, and then strontium-90 goes into the muscle and the bones. And because of the way the pelvic girdle is shaped, and the women's pelvic girdle is called the cradle of civilization.
Right. It's
broad enough to hold in some cases, an almost 15-pound fetus, and so it's got very strong bones. Well, what happens is the strontium-90 gets in there, and because the pelvic girdle holds all of the eggs and all those things that make fetuses and babies.
Right.
The strontium-90 decays. Now you say a 30-year half-life. Usually we multiply that by 4. Some people multiply it by 11. But then 4 times 30 is 120 years. So essentially, once it gets in there, it's in there.
Right.
And so it's always decaying, and so it's sending out radiation, which harms the eggs. So you get bad eggs.
Well, and that's how we end up with baby with birth defects, no brains, and so forth.
Yes. Now there could be other reasons why that water is excessively warm besides radiation. That's one that we know about.
Okay, obviously volcanoes would be one.
Yes, and we have seen a mess of volcanoes. In fact, the volcanoes in Alaska have been sending ash over to Europe. And I don't know, I mean, they could shut down traffic, air traffic, between the United States and Europe if they get any worse than they are. And in some cases, the airlines are having to fly around that ash. It's going across Canada more than the United States. So it's going into northern Europe. And but it is there. It's been very active. And we've also had large earthquakes up along the Alaskan coast and the Canadian coast. So there could be a vent there. You know, Hawaii is just, it's a volcanic zone in the middle of the Pacific plate, the tectonic plate.
Right.
And the Pacific tectonic plate is the oldest tectonic plate that we know of. So it's, you know, it's deeper than the other ones. And it is spreading. And so what happens is lava gets forced up in Hawaii, and then that provides a force to push it against the North American plate or the South American plate or the Asian plate. So it could be there. Maybe there's another. The Aleutian Islands are caused by the same physical system, and there could be magma coming up in there and warming that water. But in any case, they haven't seen anything like it. And they would like to blame our climate on this warming that's in the Gulf of Alaska. They really don't know what to expect, and nobody is saying anything about that. But that Alaskan current does make a counterclockwise spin around the Gulf of Alaska. Now, counterclockwise, you think of lows. So there's a low in the Gulf of Alaska, and then there's a high pressure that is south of that. So you've got a low and a high, and normally there would be a high off the coast of the United States. We had 3 lows now coming up from Hawaii, what they call the Pineapple Express.
Right.
And when it gets as far north as the Alaskan current, the subpolar gyre, they turn into the continent. And so that's one reason that we're having a lot of rain in British Columbia, in the Pacific Northwest and Northern California. And there's 3 more huge storms that are heading this way. I mean, I call them huge because they are very low in their pressures. They're like 964 and 958, and I think one's 974.
Right.
So those are very low pressures. And when they come in, of course, they're washing away the bluffs along the Washington-Oregon coast, and houses are falling into the ocean. Nobody ever thought that would happen along the Northwest
No,
coast.
no, not at all.
No. So this is, it could be a combination of events. Maybe we know there's methane involved now. They're starting to do testing off the Washington coast. The state of Washington, the University of Washington is sending out and also asking fishermen to measure methane. And they've discovered that methane at about 300 feet deep, that's where it turns from a liquid to a gas.
Communications Network, GCN.
All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore and Ann Morrison. We're sitting in for Dr. Bill Deagle this afternoon on the NUTRIMEDICAL report, and we will make this a live call-in show. If you have a question or comment, the call number is 800-259-5791. Ann, is there more to discuss on the radiation before we move on to the next topic?
Well, I think I do want to mention that the state of Washington, the University of Washington, that's from the state of Washington, is very interested in, they're seeing bubbling of methane coming out of the ocean off the coast of Washington state. And that is, they're tying that to a warming and a current that comes over from Japan, from one of these currents that I was just talking about, the North Pacific gyre, or the North Pacific current.
Let me see if I can figure out the science here. The methane is kept locked at the bottom of the ocean by being so cold, and when it warms up, it gets released. Is that somewhat accurate?
That is somewhat accurate, yes. If it's under high pressure, and if it's cold enough, it's captured by the water, and so pretty soon it gets packed with water, CH4. There's a lot of heating potential in methane, in one molecule of methane. And what they're discovering, and we had seen it off the North Slope of Alaska, where they're doing the oil, and there had been a rush. The Russians and the United States and Canada and Denmark are all up there at the Arctic Circle trying to find out where they can claim land, because there's a huge oil deposit up there.
Right.
And so this Russian cartographer, somebody who's going to make maps, he noticed that the water up there was boiling. Well, it wasn't boiling; it was methane being released.
Right.
Yeah, and so now the University of Washington is sending out they're asking the fishermen. They're also sending out probes, and they're looking about 300 feet down. The water is warmer, and it's warm enough to turn the methane that is being held as a liquid in the ocean to gas, and it's actually bubbling up to the surface and then escaping into the atmosphere. Now they're going to try to quantify that and see how badly that is, but there's nothing to say that warming isn't going to continue.
Right.
And that would be due probably to the radiation that's coming over from Fukushima, Japan. They don't say that. They don't blame Fukushima. They don't say it's radioactive.
Right.
But that would be my guess.
Amazing.
It's so unusual. I mean, we've had methane there for millennia. It hasn't bubbled up to the surface of the ocean. So there's a lot of concern about that. And methane is 20 times better at keeping heat trapped on the Earth as carbon dioxide. So
when it gets into the atmosphere, it will cause more of a greenhouse effect than the carbon dioxide would.
Yes, that's right. And the other thing is that it's flammable. Carbon dioxide is CO2. Well, you don't hear any hydrogen. You don't hear any H in there. But methane is CH4, so there's a lot of hydrogen. And I don't know if you did that physics experiment in high school where they separated out the oxygen from the hydrogen, but the hydrogen, and we we made a flamethrower with that. But we had to keep it away from the oxygen, because otherwise it would have exploded. So, you don't want to do that at home, but hydrogen is an explosive. And there has been a report from a scientist who says that should the methane class rates that are down in the Gulf of Mexico, where that Deepwell Horizon, blew up, that should the methane bubble that's down there escape to the surface, and should it turn into a gas, one of those oil rigs, there's enough fire on one of those things to set it off, and it would burn your skin 10 miles away, your bare skin.
It would be basically a fuel air explosion, a fuel air bomb is what it would become.
Yes. And so there is some concern down there about that. And I know when I did my studies, I went to an oil refinery, and we were told not to take flash pictures. And the reason was because there was so much hydrogen in the air that just the flash of a flash bulb would have set it off, and it could have been like you said, a fuel air explosion.
Well, many of our listeners under age 40 don't have a clue what a flash bulb is.
Well, that's true. Well, I don't know if it would. I have a little flash. I have a flash on my little digital camera, but I don't know if it would cause an explosion or not.
Well, that's all internal. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're under 40 years old, a flash bulb is something that was used more than 30 years ago. And it actually was a small bulb, and it was a one-time use. And when you squeeze the go button, it flashed a very bright light, and then frequently the glass itself would pop, or if it had a plastic cover, that would pop and melt. So there was kind of a violent end to the little flash bulb that was used one time and then disposed of. Is that somewhat accurate?
Remember that. Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah.
Yes. Back back in there.
So let's say that a hunter had the influenza vaccination either last year or this year that had the attenuated live virus, and people are likely to have gotten that because if you're between the ages of 19 and 50, you can get the one that goes up your nose, and so you don't have to get stuck. And that's the attenuated live virus. Well, they put an H3N2. Now, we're talking about an H5N2. So you can tell they're similar. I mean, yeah, they got 5 H's instead of 3 H's, but the H3N2 was in the same vaccine as the H1N1, and the H1N1 the previous year had killed a lot of people. So it's not really an avian flu, but they put it in the vaccine anyway.
Right.
And then this year, what happened was that apparently the H3N2 has formed a new subclade, and it isn't handled by the vaccine. So they have the H3N2 from 2 years ago, and now they have a new subclade of the H3N2 that they don't have any vaccine against. So people are dying from this, and they're going in the hospital and getting respiratory failure, and in some cases kidney failure. So let's say that a hunter decides he's going to go out and get some pintail ducks for his table, and I don't have any problem with harvesting fowl or anything that's out there. You know, they've got enough permits and licenses to make sure that we're not taking too much, and you know, it's food for your table. So let's say that a fellow a hunter had gotten this vaccine, so he's got live attenuated H3N2 in his body, and let's say he gets this pintail duck, northern pintail duck. He takes it home and he eats it, and it's got the H5N2. So now we've got an H3N2 that's going to mix with the H5N2. Now we know that the H3N2 can be spread among people. The H5N2 can't. But if those two viruses get together and trade those little genes, then the H5N2 could become transmissible between people. So you understand what I'm saying?
Really? Absolutely, yes.
Yes. So we can have not only this H3N2 variant, actually this is a subclade, it's not a variant. Last year was a variant. This year it's a subclade, and we have no protection against that, and it would only take one hunter to eat a northern pintail duck that had the H5N2 to turn the H5N2 into something that was transmissible among humans, and what do you know, we're off to the races again.
Absolutely.
So they're trying to put into place biosecurity. I personally think this is a biowarfare weapon. There's no way that these wild birds came down from Russia or China or any other place, or came across the country from the East Coast, because they migrate north to south. They don't migrate east to west.
Right.
And
well, that makes perfect sense, yeah.
And we know that if these wild birds get among poultry, then all the poultry die. I mean, poultry is an indicator.
Domestic poultry.
Domestic poultry is an indicator. Right. And like I said, they already had a case up in British Columbia where they had to eliminate them and burn them, and you know, these things live forever in water of a certain temperature. So
if you're cooking fowl, and whether it's wild or domestic, would sufficient heat be enough to kill the virus?
Well, that's what they're saying, and they're saying that if you are cooking fowl, you need to cook it in a regular oven because you want it heated through. And but they also say that you got to handle it properly. That means you got to wear gloves when you're handling it. I mean, the virus could be on the packaging. So from the time you pick it up in the grocery store until the time you get it in the oven, you've got to treat it like a biohazard.
Really? That's scary.
Well, they put the information out there, but nobody seems to be reading it, and I suppose somebody will have to die. Okay, I wanted go from that to cosmic rays. This year, yeah, we went through a maximum, a solar maximum. Now, the sunspot cycle is 22 years. So every 22 years, we go through what's called a solar maximum, and that's when you get the maximum number of sunspots per year, supposedly. It didn't happen this year for us. This year we had a mini-max. That is, we had the third smallest number of sunspots for a maximum. Yes. So we're talking like a Dalton minimum, which occurred around 1800, or a Maunder minimum, which occurred around 1650. And what happened on the Earth during those times, where the sunspot activity or the solar activity is very low, is that we get very cold. Now, the other thing that happens is that the sun and its solar wind protect us from cosmic rays. And cosmic rays are extremely fast-moving photons and other, well, I'm just going to call it debris. You know, it's just ions and stuff. But it moves very fast, so it has a lot of kinetic energy, and it goes through. I mean, they found them in the deepest mines on Earth. I mean, there's no protection for us except for the sun. And that's why the astronauts go into space on a 22-year cycle or 11-year cycle, if you want to go from 0 to 0 instead of from plus to plus or plus to plus. And so right now, because of the low, because the sun is inactive, we don't have that protection that we would have from cosmic rays. Now, the space age isn't very long. I mean, what are we talking? 74 to 14. That's 40 years. So, but this is the high. We have observed the highest fluxes of cosmic rays in that 40-year period. Now, what happens is when they go through you, because they're so energetic, they can do DNA damage. So you're talking cancers, you're talking birth defects, you're talking mutations. I mean, this is where babies get born and they don't have the right number of genes, or they don't have the right number. You know, it's a bad time. So if you think anybody in your family is going to want to get pregnant in the next 22 years, you want to do it now, because it's only going to get worse as we go towards the solar minimum, which is 11 years away, so it'd be in 2025. This could be a deep solar minimum.
Ann Morrison, sitting in for Dr. Bill Deagle here on the NUTRIMEDICAL report. Well, Ann, off air, I think we've discussed, we're pretty much exhausted the matters of solar energy coming at us and the dangers presented by that. Let's move on to Ebola.
Well, Ebola is still active in West Africa, and we just had a patient, a nurse, who was transferred to the NIH Clinical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, and so she'll be treated there, and I'm going to assume that she's going to get extra. I mean, they haven't lost anybody there yet. We lost something in Texas, but we haven't lost anybody at NIH. So we'll assume that she's going to be okay, and that they'll have proper protection so that nobody else catches it. But it doesn't take much to catch this.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. It's pretty easy to catch, apparently.
Now, they do have another case. He escaped from Guinea, and apparently he wasn't feeling very well, so he went to another country to get, so he wouldn't be around sick people. He went to Guinea-Bissau, which is just along the river in Guinea. You know, it's just a very small country. But he went through the border crossing, and he escaped detection, and he boarded a bus and went to a city, and he was apprehended. So they've got him under quarantine. Now there's another nurse that's being held on a reunion French island, just east of Madagascar, and Madagascar is just east of southern Africa.
Right.
And Madagascar has a very unique ecological system. Well, they've got animals there we don't find anyplace else in the world.
That's
So
true.
I'm glad that they didn't take her there, and instead they took her to Reunion. I doubt that they will transfer her to France. I think they'll probably just try to treat her there. That would just be my guess. Now, in addition, we have some miners in eastern Sierra Leone. What happened was the Russians took their people out of this mining district when the Ebola virus started killing people. So the mines are closed, but the local natives are still living there. And apparently Ebola has popped up there. Now, it probably was just somebody went to visit their relative, or maybe they ate some bush meat. There was a fellow in India who came back, in Taiwan, I'm sorry, in Taiwan, he came back from Nigeria. Nigeria isn't even on the suspect list. But he went into the hospital feeling ill, and he admitted that he had eaten bat when he was in Nigeria.
Right.
So, people do things that they shouldn't be doing. This virus is carried by bush meat, and you don't want to be eating bush meat unless you know for sure that it's well cooked, or that the animal wasn't sick or didn't carry the virus.
Well, unless you're a scientist, there's no way you can know that.
There's no way. That's right. They don't even know how to test the dogs that belong to the nurses that they're bringing back from over there.
Really?
India has the best surveillance. Now, if you fly into India and they think that you haven't been close to Western Africa, every secretion from your body is tested. They don't just take the blood. No, they take the sweat, they take the spit, they take the urine, and they probably look at stool. And all of those things have to be clear for 21 days before they'll even let you into the country. They are determined not to get Ebola in India. I think we need to we know that Ebola doesn't show up in the blood until the person is highly contagious.
Right.
We know that. But we know that the virus is in the person. And in fact, if you get a drop of sweat on you from somebody who has Ebola, you'll catch it. It's very infective.
Right.
It's not very I always get those two terms mixed up. But you can get it, but you can't transmit it through the air. I guess you can in certain circumstances. But in any case, India has the most progressive surveillance for Ebola that I know of. And we should be doing the same thing.
We should be. Yeah, we should be.
And they have new test equipment out now where they don't have to take blood out of your arm. They can just take a couple of drops from a needle stick, and they can test for it. The test now only takes 18 minutes if you go that way. If you take a vial out of your arm, it takes 2 or 3 days.
Right.
So they have test strips out that are like pregnancy strips, and they just put it on one of those, and then you look at the lines, and that tells you not only whether you have malaria or whether you have Ebola or if you have both.
Right.
And
Ebola's evaporated off the mainstream news until the holidays are over, and I think when the holidays are over after the first of the year, I believe it's going to be back in mainstream news with a vengeance.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. We're not very patient people. People are, if it's more than a week, if you have to wait 3 weeks for a quarantine, that seems like forever to us. It just does. We're used to incubation periods of 3 to 5 days. For instance, and I do the same thing. If I get a virus, I think, well, where was I 3 to 5 days ago? And then I can say, oh yeah, I was doing that, and I was around a lot of people, and that's probably where I got it from. But you try going back 3 weeks. There's no way that you're going to remember through 3 weeks where you might have caught something from.
Right.
And so it's real easy to lose sight light of this. But at the same time, that means that it can be growing in the United States, even as we speak, from somebody who was exposed 3 weeks ago or longer.
Exactly.
I mean, the men carry it in their semen for up to 3 months.
Well, India's doing the right thing, and basically they're duplicating what we used to do at Ellis Island up until 1952, which is quarantine people long enough to make proof positive sure that they don't have any kind of communicable disease.
Well, and that's the other thing the Indians are doing. They're also looking at the semen. A male has to supply a semen sample.
Right.
I mean, we would find that very intrusive. But the Indians, they say, no, we're not going to get Ebola in India.
Well, good for them.
And they have finally discovered, do you remember the doctor that was brought back here, and all he was doing was delivering babies, and he managed to get Ebola?
I remember that one, yep.
Well, they've discovered that there was a pregnancy, a maternity wing of a hospital, and a couple of women came in, and they were at term, and they could feel the babies moving. And then suddenly the baby, and they didn't, I mean, they had certificates that said they had been cleared of, maybe they had had Ebola, but they were clear of it. And the baby stopped moving. Well, normally a female body will expel a fetus that dies. But after a while, when it didn't, they went in and they took them. And the fetuses were dead. And they had died of Ebola. And what they discovered was that the placental fluid was full of Ebola virus. Now, the women were sick.
Yeah, right.
The women were not. Well, it's like the Ebola virus in the semen in men. Somehow it's able to stay in the reproductive organs of both men and women. And so until you start, well, I don't want to get into any medical that would be too gruesome, but they got to have a way of finding it wherever it is in the body. I mean, we can't.
They do, yes.
Yeah, okay. Cuba sent some doctors to Guinea, which is in Western Africa, and they can't get deployed because they don't speak French.
Right.
And I find that really difficult to understand that somebody wouldn't know that if you're going to Guinea, you need to speak French.
Right.
I mean, that just
Seems pretty basic, doesn't it?
seems pretty basic to me.
Yes.
They are coming out with some new. Oh my goodness, John, we're
out of time. And thank you very much, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore and Ann Morrison signing off here on the NutriMedical Report on Friday, the 19th of December. Everybody have a good evening, and God bless America.
Your written law, California law, United States federal law, NRC to enforce. By law, have to have somewhere to put the spent fuel rods. They promised us they would have the spent fuel rods taken care of by 1976, then by 1982, then by 1985, then 1991. It's 2013, you still store them on site.